if you've been listening to this show, you know a couple of days ago, I believe it was 2 days ago, Brady Quinn hinted at a potential surprise not only near the top of the draft, but also after the draft. And I thought it was the Atlanta Falcons that he was referring to, that apparently this is a team who looks like they need a quarterback but might go in the opposite direction. And now all of a sudden it's starting to make some sense. We had a conversation with Albert Breer yesterday, and other reports are starting to becoming more and more evident that we could be seeing some changes in Houston when it comes to the Houston Texans picking number 2 overall, and that Nick Caserio, the general manager, could be out after the draft and potentially heading back to New England. And then you've got the 49ers assistant GM who could be taking over in Houston. So we've got massive changes that could be taking place, and it involves the Houston Texans, which also, by the way, the Will Anderson being a real possibility at 2 for Houston is picking up steam as well, too. How about Brady Quinn trying to hint at that earlier in the week, and then it drops a couple of days later? Look at you, sourcing.
This is some Game of Thrones type-ish going on, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you have D'Amico Ryans who comes in as the head coach. The Texans were in a pretty bad spot when he accepted the job. And in order to get reassurances when you're a first-time head coach, to make sure that you go in and you have everything you need to be successful, you want power. It's not just about the contract. You want to have power over the roster, power over certain decisions. And I think when D'Amico Ryans got there, he probably wanted to exercise some of the power in regards to the draft and how he sees things. And I would not be shocked at all if D'Amico Ryans didn't look at the success that they've had in San Francisco and say, this was largely built based off our defense and being able to create stability for our team and load up with some really talented players. And, we don't necessarily have to have a quarterback who I believe he's stated has to be the savior. Now, the only problem with that whole logic and theory is they haven't won a Super Bowl. So they've had a lot of success in San Francisco, but they haven't won a Super Bowl with that philosophy, at least when he was a part of the 49ers. So the hard thing is he's going to go in there, but he's working with a guy who's a general manager that he might know and be familiar with, but he doesn't have a working relationship with. Who does he have a working relationship with? Adam Peters. Adam Peters is one of the best in the NFL as far as a talent evaluator and a scout. He was with the Denver Broncos where, I believe him and John Lynch had somewhat of a relationship. So as soon as John Lynch went up to the 49ers to take over as their general manager, who do you think he tabbed as one of the first people he wanted to bring in? Adam Peters. So Adam Peters is now up in San Francisco, but there's no doubt at all, I would imagine he wants the general manager job, and he's got a good working relationship with D'Amico Ryans. So this whole scenario could play out where you see D'Amico maybe take who he wants at 2, or they trade back out of that spot for another team that wants a quarterback at number 2, and then they try to go after either a quarterback with that second pick, or they just take the best player available and they move forward with this sort of game plan, I guess, and then Caserio moves on and Peters moves in. It's not impossible to happen. This is very, very, very much how things work, especially when it comes to the front office before and after the draft.
It's cutthroat, man.
Well, Ned Stark, he had his eye on just being the hand of the king, but then Ned was tragically removed, and then everything, all hell broke loose. And then now you have Joffrey sitting there, and he's running amok. And you're looking at Jon Snow. He's been sent to the wall. And now we're looking at the dragons and Khaleesi. They haven't been birthed yet, but it's close.
Khaleesi.
Khal Drogo has laid stake and laid claim to being part of what may take place in terms of them taking over the games of Thrones, the Iron Throne. And that's what's going on in Houston right now.
So you're telling me that D'Amico Ryans has got Nick Caserio's head on a spike outside the castle? Is that what's happening here?
For everybody to see.
Jeez.
That's exactly. Yeah, thank you for summing it up for me. Because that's exactly what Joffrey was doing. He was putting heads on spikes before they poisoned him and got him up out of there. And Littlefinger was conspiring. Now I don't know who the Littlefinger is in this scenario.
Probably me.
Okay. Oh. Wow. Okay.
Oh God.
I'm just gonna stop there.
No, I'm not. That's okay. Again, you guys take it in a direction. You take it in a direction.
You
it doesn't
said
need
it,
to go. Yeah, it didn't.
How do you want us to interpret that?
All right.
Yeah, there was. Yeah, yes, I do.
How do you want us to interpret that?
Jonas Littlefinger.
Yeah, Berto, I do remember those. Yes.
Yeah, they were.
That was Berto's highlight for the show.
Yeah, they were.
The dog piles. Yeah, that was his highlight from the show. Khaleesi, by the way, man, oh man.
Yeah, she was the mother of dragons. Yeah. I'll tell you that.
Some lucky dragons. I'll tell you.
She could take that fire really well. Didn't get burnt.
Yeah.
You know?
What a great show.
Yeah,
just a fun show.
I mean, I loved it. You know,
I don't understand why if you feel like you're going to make a change at GM, why would you do it after the draft? Like,
any of the work that's been done on the draft and the prospects is pretty much done at this point. You know, now it's just about the decision makers finalizing how they think and what they want the draft board to be and different potential decisions, and then coming up with the values. You know, if there's trade scenarios and all that, right? You're kind of mocking those things up. You know, I remember talking to Rick Spielman about this about a month ago, and he said we would have all our guys look at mock drafts. And I kind of laughed. I was like, well, why would you pay any attention to what guys who don't have the type of access to health information and mental evaluations and the interviews and workouts, why would you care what they think? He goes, oh, no, we don't care what they think. He goes, we wanted to see different scenarios play out. He goes, so sometimes you get these wild scenarios that we're like, this isn't even possible, but it's a good exercise to go through it to see how we would react, what would be our response to it. So, you know, most of the evaluations are done. It's really just about getting a sense for who you're going to take in those spots and then playing out different scenarios. And so you'll see a lot of times turnover in front offices around this time or after the draft. And so you allow those scouts and other folks involved to potentially land somewhere else for another opportunity.
Nick Caserio was doomed the second he got there because it was right after he got there that the Deshaun Watson stuff fell apart and he demanded a trade, and they just never were able to find footing. And he was the guy that had to, you know, basically face the media and explain the decision. Were they going to trade Deshaun Watson? Were they not going to trade him? Try and convince him, the multiple head coaches. Like, if you're Nick Caserio, you got to be happy to get the hell out of there, right? At least go back to New England, someplace you're familiar with, and just get away from the disaster that the Houston Texans is. I mean, that team is a mess. So if you're Caserio, hey, listen, your head's on a spike outside the castle. Why not?
Is he going back to another Game of Thrones?
Yeah,
if he goes back to
one of the other houses,
New England,
yeah, one of the other families.
It ain't clean over there either.
Yeah, but in comparison to Houston, I mean, like, look, the Commandos look almost clean in comparison to Houston over the past several years. And just when Caserio got there, having to have the Deshaun Watson issue just fall on his lap, and he's the guy who's got to figure out how to move on from him and try and get enough compensation and everything from there. It just felt like he never had a real opportunity in Houston. So I'm sure he's probably happy to be killed off in this episode so he can go back to hang out with Bill Belichick, you know. Get the old band back together there in New England. So
old band. Yeah,
so there is that is your update on the Houston Texans and that whole situation. Also, you remember Doug Whaley when he was the GM in Buffalo, and they fired him right after the draft, and he still hung out in Buffalo and was having beers at like the Anchor Bar afterwards. Do you think Nick Caserio is going to sit around Houston and have a couple of cocktails after he gets clipped the Monday after the draft? Or do you think he just goes straight back to New England and hangs out with Brady's in-laws, throws back a couple of pints of Sam Adams back there? What do you think his plan is after he gets taken out by D'Amico Ryans and everybody in Houston? What do you think his next move is?
I mean, I don't know. I'll be honest with you. I don't really care either.
Okay,
you know,
that's fair.
He can do whatever he wants at that point.
That's
Hopefully he's find an opportunity to be gainfully employed again if they're moving on in that capacity. It may be a scenario where he just decides to move on his own. D'Amico doesn't clip him or then fire him, and then it creates the vacancy for Adam Peters to move into that spot.
Yeah, but how about me? How about me dropping Doug Whaley knowledge on you right there? Just throw that right in your lap here on a Friday morning.
There's a lot of other things you threw in there that I was a little not really sure what the hell was going on.
That's all right. It happens from time to time.
Take that, little finger.